everyone. Good morning and welcome to our weekly Coffee and Compliance EHS webinar series, where we chat with thought leaders and regulators about emerging issues, career development and case studies, and just a lot more. But today we're really excited to be featuring Amy Kronson, an environmental scientist at the State Water Resources Control Board.
Yes, we are so excited for today's conversation. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. So we'll save the last 5 minutes for questions, and you can add them to the question option in your control panel, and we'll try to get to them before the end of the webinar.
And before we get started, I just want to introduce ourselves. My name is Jillian. I'm the Compliance Solutions Manager here at Mapestry.
And my name's Celine. I'm the Customer Success Manager, and Jillian and I work on the Customer Experience team here at Mapestry.
Yeah, and for those of you who are new on our call, for those of you who are new today and you're on our call, welcome. We like to do introduction to Mapestry. We are an environmental compliance platform on the software side for industrial facilities. Mapestry focuses on providing transparency, promoting collaboration, ensuring efficiency, and finally creating accountability for your compliance obligations.
Yes, we are a data-driven software that helps companies monitor, analyze, and track all their environmental compliance needs in one system.
Great. And with that, we're super happy to welcome Amy. Hi, Amy. Good morning. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We're super excited to have you. Just a little bit of background. Amy has been working for the Water Board for the past 4 years, and today she joins us to share her insight on California's industrial stormwater permit and touch on TMDLs.
All right, well, I'm so excited to have you. We have some really great questions, so let's just dive right into it. So if you don't mind giving us a little background about your role, how you got into the role. We chatted about this before the call, but did you always want to work for the Water Board is a question of ours, and we'd love to hear your story.
Sure. So I actually started working in industrial construction and municipal stormwater in 2008 as a student aide here at the Water Board. And I kind of fell into it because I was a marine biology major, and a classmate of mine knew that they were hiring folks for the ocean unit here at the Water Board, which at the time was looking at stormwater discharges into the ocean. And so I just kind of fell into stormwater and found that I was really interested in the nexus between urban and environment, and the process of pollutants leaving construction sites, industrial facilities, and other municipal areas into our waterways untreated. So it was just a really fascinating subject. I worked here all through college, and I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from Oregon State University. And then I actually went to Albuquerque, New Mexico for a couple of years, and I was a municipal stormwater program manager there. And worked in a little bit of compliance with groundwater, drinking water, water conservation, and stormwater out there in Albuquerque. And then I came back here 4 years ago, back to the Water Board, still doing industrial and construction stormwater. And then just last year, I was promoted to be the unit chief for industrial and construction stormwater permitting here at the State Board. So I didn't go into school thinking I wanted to work for the Water Boards, but I've definitely found my home here. So
awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, and I love from marine biology, that's super interesting, and how that kind of correlates with stormwater. At the end of the day, it makes total sense. It's just a really cool way to navigate from marine biology into stormwater. It's very interesting pathway, and then also the background in environmental science helps too. So that's really cool. Can you tell us about what is it like in the day of somebody who works at the Water Board?
Sure, yeah. I mean, right now it's a little bit different, but here in Sacramento we have our 25-story office building, Cali, PA, and it houses Water Board, Air Board, pesticide regulation, toxic substance control. And so it's a great environment to work in. I get to collaborate with colleagues that work in like the 401 certification program, or our stormwater planning unit, and many other areas of the Division of Water Quality here. So day to day, it is a lot of customer interface and working with dischargers, working with the regional water board staff, other colleagues, and solving problems, which I find interesting and fun. And then I manage a staff of 6 who work on writing and implementing the stormwater regulations for industrial and construction. So it's a pleasure to work with them and to figure out all of these issues throughout the state. And my predecessors were wonderful. Folks may know Laurel Wardrop. She was in my position for a long time, and she taught me a lot. So it's been good.
That's so awesome. And I think we've had Laurel on Coffee and Compliance before too. So that's so cool that we still get to stay in touch with you guys as you navigate through the water board. So awesome. Cool. Well, I think we should jump into some more specific questions.
Really quick, Selena, I think we may have lost Amy's audio. On, yeah, I don't know. It looks like we got a little message and that we've lost some audio. I don't see Amy's mic coming up.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Just kidding.
Okay.
We can hear you.
It looks like we're good.
Okay.
So much audio.
Good catch. Perfect.
We'll continue on with our conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump into some of our questions. We have a lot about TMDLs and water regulations, so I'm excited to ask you. So first of all, we kind of have a wide range of customers we work with. Not all of them are in California, but a lot of them are. So can you just take a second to explain what the TMDLs are, so the total maximum daily loads, and why they're incorporated in the Stormwater General Permit?
Yeah, so a TMDL, or total maximum daily load, is the calculation of the maximum concentration of a pollutant allowed to enter a water body so that the water body will meet and continue to meet water quality standards for that particular pollutant. So that's a mouthful. That is the definition from US EPA if you Google TMDL. But basically, it is that allowable amount for that water body to make sure that it's still attaining the beneficial uses, what we call in California, of that water body. So that it's still, healthy to swim in, can be used for recreation, whatever the beneficial use is. And then a TMDL determines a pollutant reduction target and allocates load reductions necessary to the sources of the pollutant. So in this case, it would be industrial stormwater. The TMDLs can either be developed by the water boards or by US EPA, and then they're adopted into each regional board basin plan. The TMDL documents establish the maximum levels of the pollutant, evaluate the sources of the pollutants, and set those waste load allocations for those sources. So the TMDLs are not self-implementing, and they must be adopted into a statewide permit like the Industrial General Permit, so we can work toward meeting those waste load allocations in the receiving water and to meet the water quality standards. So what's interesting about the TMDLs is that, they're adopted into the basin plans in a separate action. And the TMDL includes the waste load allocations for all the sources. So it may be industrial stormwater, it may be a publicly owned or operated treatment works, like a wastewater treatment plant. And those sources and those load allocations are written into the TMDL. So to make them implementable, we have to adopt them into a permit, like the industrial stormwater permit or, say, an NPDES wastewater permit. And so that's what we did in the amendments that were adopted in 2018 to the Industrial General Permit. We took those waste load allocations that were allocated to industrial stormwater as a source, translated them into something that we hoped could be workable, and then adopted it into the permit.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially for somebody who's not totally in the world of stormwater all the time. I mean, for most of it I am, but I'm on the software side a little more. So that's a really good understanding of it and is an awesome explanation, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. And this is also for our audience too. So, but yeah, in general, what are some of the most significant TMDLs that, have been impacting industrial facilities that have come up a lot? I imagine there's a few that are, more or less.
Yeah, so I would say the most impactful TMDLs for the industrial folks would be those that carry numeric effluent limitations. Numeric effluent limitations are a limit of a pollutant that can leave your site. A lot of times they're very small limits that you have to meet, and they carry with them the mandatory minimum penalties if you exceed the numeric effluent limitation. So these are in regions 4 and 8. So Los Angeles and Santa Ana have a few of these TMDLs with numeric effluent limitations. And then San Diego has some that will be in effect later down the road, I think 2032, but I could be wrong. I'll have to double check that. And so we're seeing a lot of inquiries and a lot of concern in Los Angeles and Santa Ana regions about meeting these numeric effluent limitations. And so we're trying to work with industrial facilities and consultants to figure out how to best manage that. And that's definitely the most impactful on the industrial facilities.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. It's part of you mentioned like the 2018 amendment, and it's kind of new. So for our permittees, what kind of steps can you recommend when, as far as if they do exceed an NAL, since we're on that topic, and how to approach a violation? Yeah, what can you recommend?
Yeah, so the way that the permit is written for numeric effluent limitations specifically, and then also most of the numeric action levels, you have to exceed the level twice to be considered an exceedance. And the reason that we did this is that we want to create a feedback loop where if you pull a sample and find that you're in exceedance of either a numeric action level or a numeric effluent limitation, you have the opportunity to do a corrective action to see what might be going wrong with your BMPs and address it before you exceed twice. If for an unfortunate reason you exceed the numeric effluent limitation twice for the same parameter at the same discharge location, then you will be subject to that violation of the permit and anything that goes along with it, including mandatory minimum penalty if that applies. So what I really recommend is staying on top of your BMPs, knowing your site well, looking for those issues and controlling the sources wherever you can. Source control is a major component to compliance, and it really helps with your costs down the line as well. If you can control the source of a pollutant, then you can spend less money on BMPs and exceedance response action reports, and that kind of stuff. So I always think that source control is the best way to approach that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And so when you exceed an NAL, is it the same process following an exceedance as an NAL, or is it different?
Yeah, so the process is a bit different. There's always a time I could be wrong, but I think for most of the numeric effluent limitations, you don't end up then following the exceedance response or ERA process. You have to do a water quality-based corrective action report in SMART, and the regional board will also follow up if there's a mandatory minimum penalty or some other kind of notice of violation or other enforcement action. So I don't want to terrify people about exceeding a numeric effluent limitation, but there is some pretty strong language in the regulations. And so the regional boards, state board, and our Office of Enforcement are very willing to work with folks. I think the best advice I can give for that process is to be in touch with your regional board staff, and see what you can do, make sure that you are complying with the permit and doing everything that you can. You know, I was telling Celine earlier that we do often get calls and questions that are, you know, hypothetical scenarios, and we're happy to answer those. The answer may be, I can't really tell you because I haven't been to the site and I'm not sure what the situation is, but we'll give the best information we can. Our goal is not to penalize 24/7, but to help folks come into compliance and to meet water quality.
Yeah.
And then for the numeric action levels, you go through the exceedance response action process, where you may go into level 1 and then level 2 for that pollutant, and that requires that you do a response action, a technical report, whatever it is for the level that you're in for that pollutant.
That's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. I think throughout all our webinars, we keep hearing the same theme of work either with your regulators or your water board or whoever is there, because they're there to support you in some way or another. They're not out to get you if you ask and are open to their feedback.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We'd rather be in communication than, you know, having to issue enforcement action.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Cool. Well, this is very helpful, especially with the NELs versus NALs. I've always gotten a little confused by them. But I guess some other questions about that is, sorry, I lost my place. Are there any discretions for the percent you exceed an NEL?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly if the question is if you're asking about the serious violation versus chronic, et cetera, but there's a 20% for group 1 pollutants and 40% for group 2 pollutants. If you exceed over that amount, then you're in the serious or chronic violation, which carries with it the mandatory minimum penalties. So as far as discretion, there isn't any discretion for, like, say you exceed twice and there's a low percentage, you know, and you're just over a little bit. Unfortunately, with numeric effluent limitations, we aren't able to say, oh, we'll just, that's not really an exceedance, because it's very strict within the regulations. But again, work with your water board, see if you can correct the issue. You know, the other thing is to always make sure that your data entry is correct too. And if you're working with a company like Mapistry, they help with that a lot. But we see a lot of data put into smarts that hasn't been QA'd or checked. And so, you know, sometimes people will put in their results in micrograms per liter instead of milligrams per liter. And that shows, you know, a huge difference. And it, you know, it goes both ways. So check your units, make sure your data is correct. You know, upload your lab reports so that we can verify if we need to. We'll go into that attachments tab and check the lab reports and say, did they really report this in micrograms per liter? Because that's not normal, you know, something, if it comes up. But having you all do it on your end helps everyone. So that's important. And I kind of lost sight of what the question was, but there's not a lot of discretion for how much you exceed.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's for one good to know that you do look at those attachments and you are kind of comparing. Sometimes we don't know what's on the other end of like lab reports, especially. So, you know, if there's a case, for example, if somebody does kind of, you know, have incorrect entries, do you reach out? Do you let people know, or do you kind of leave it up to the facilitator to kind of say like, hey, you know, I noticed that we did this incorrectly. Can we actually redact that?
Yeah, so a lot of times it will come from a consultant that will reach out to us and say, I noticed that my client results look off. Can you check that? Or a lot of times we'll get questions from either the discharger or the consultant saying, it says I'm in level 1 or level 2 for this parameter, and I shouldn't be, or I should be in level 1 or 2, and it doesn't say. So then we'll go back and check the data and make sure that it's all correct in there. But then also the regional boards will sometimes pull reports to look at to prioritize inspections. And if something is off, they'll check then, and then they would be in contact with the discharger or the consultant, whoever's listed in SMART.
Okay. Yeah, good to know that that communication can be there. And if anything, maybe encouraged to reach out and get some of that information cleared up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as far as the discretion with NELs, it's mostly like you mentioned the chronic. So, you know, if there's past that percentage, can you clarify that again? If like 40% over the limit, or I didn't quite hear it, but that's kind of where the violation aspect would kind of start to kick in.
Right, yeah. So it's 20% for group 1 pollutants, which are listed in attachment A of the permit, and 40% for group 2 pollutants. And that is actually in our enforcement policy, which I know it's a little in the weeds for folks, but if you just Google State Water Board enforcement policy and then maybe do a search for stormwater or something like that, it can really help understand that. So I don't have it pulled up right now. I just have my notes. But yes, 20% for group 1 pollutants and 40% for group 2 pollutants.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying. It's good to also let our audience know where they can find some of that information. So thank you. Yeah, and then just while we're kind of just take a step back in general, just definitions. You can just go over, you know, some of the differences. There's NALs, numeric action levels, and there's also TMDL NALs, the TNALs. You could kind of talk about the differences between those, and then maybe, you know, how you would approach an exceedance for the difference between the two.
Sure, yeah. So numeric action levels, all of them, TMDL or not, are created as part of a feedback loop. The reason we have numeric action levels is to show when there may be a potential problem leaving your site. So the numeric action levels are values that are informative of what pollutants may have the potential to contribute to an exceedance of a water quality standard downstream in the receiving water. The reason that we have specific TMDL related numeric action levels is that when we created the industrial general permit, there are the 3 main things that you're sampling for: oil and grease, total suspended solids, and pH. And those are all indicators of, you know, some potential problem, right? You're looking at sediments leaving your site, you're looking at oil and grease leaving your site, and then pH changes that come from, you know, any spill of materials or some process that's happening there. In the construction world, it's usually concrete. In industrial, it could be really anything. So we have those 3 numeric action levels, and then we have the SIC code specific numeric action levels, which might point to some issue for your specific activity that you're doing on that site. And then when TMDLs came in, we're looking at specific pollutant combinations in the total maximum daily load that may be an issue in your receiving water downstream, depending on where you are. And so what we wanted to do is for TMDLs that were written a little bit less explicitly in terms of their waste load allocation, saying, you know, you can have this many pounds per year. We're not going to make you sample all of your water, dry it out, measure each pollutant, and give us the load in pounds, right? It doesn't really make sense practically, but we do know that we're looking for any release of those pollutants from the industrial facility. And what we really want to see is folks engaging in that feedback loop, seeing that there may be an issue and doing what they can to control it. whether that be through the use of BMPs or some other type of source control. Keeping it in a storm-resistant shelter, bringing it inside, whatever it may be. And so the TMDL numeric action levels are for pollutants that are listed in that TMDL for that specific basin. And so it's a little bit more specific to the industrial activity, the receiving water where your site may drain to, and the issues that receiving water is having with a certain pollutant. So all NALs are really part of a feedback loop. It's just that we've added these other ones on to help comply with the total maximum daily load, and also as a means to translate that waste load allocation from the TMDL into a workable number and response action. So for the TMDL numeric action levels, those have the same process if you exceed as the regular NALs. So you go through that exceedance response action process, the ERA process, and the level 1 or level 2 process there. So you can follow all of the same requirements for both types of NAL.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. It gets kind of tricky with the acronyms, of course, and like the differences, and just so it's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, it can get really confusing too. So tell me to slow down if I need to.
This is all very helpful.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to apply this to my day-to-day. So awesome. Let's maybe jump into a couple questions. I saw some come through the chat, so I want to make sure that we at least touch on a couple of them. I think this one's a good one. Does the 2-time exceedance for the NEL get reset each calendar year?
It's the reporting period. So it's really on the fiscal year, July 1st through June 30th.
Okay, perfect.
And so it gets reset. So does it, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you exceed, if you exceed the NEL in 2019, 2020, and then it comes to the next reporting year for you have you start over.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I'm only hesitating because that language is a little, I'm like, well, it doesn't really, you don't start over, but yeah, for the purposes of this, yeah, it's within the reporting period. So any 2 exceedances within that July 1st through June 30th time. Yeah.
Perfect. And then somebody did ask how many exceedances for an NEL will result in the mandatory penalties. That's just 2, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Cool. I think that's all we really have time for today. So thank you everybody for joining. And thank you, Amy, so much for sharing all your knowledge. This was very insightful, and I think everybody, including myself, has learned a lot today.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And just put a plug there. You can always reach out to us at stormwater@waterboards.ca.gov. We monitor that email, Monday through Friday business hours, and we're pretty responsive. But please ask any questions that you have, and we're happy to get back to dischargers, consultants, anyone. So.
Awesome. It's so good to know. Thank you so much, because I definitely let people know too. I mean, I reach out to the water board and ask questions, and you guys are super on it, and I really appreciate that, especially during the pandemic. It's been really rough, and people still do have questions. I know that you guys on your end are still trying to deal with the changes and everything like that. So thank you for letting us know we can still reach out and being on the other end of things, and really trying to work with us. I do want to highlight, it's not every day that we get to speak with someone from the water board. So thank you for all your clarity today, this morning. Hopefully it's very helpful for our audience and for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, and I think the main thing too to take away is that you can always reach out to the water board or your inspectors or whoever you're working with. They're not going to bite, and they're going to be there to support. So I think that's wonderful, and thank you again for sharing that.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, everybody, I hope you had a good time and enjoyed our webinar today. And please join us next week. We'll be talking to Tina from Lehigh Hansen. She'll be discussing the impact of stormwater on the building materials industry. So that will be a very fun conversation.
And software. She'll be talking about software.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Stormwater on the software. Skip that part.
Yeah, but thank you everyone so much. And if you have any questions or comments or any suggestions, feedback from our webinar today, feel free to shoot us an email, info@mapstreet.com. If you have any questions for Stormwater, feel free to reach out to Amy and the water board. And it sounds like they'll definitely help you out too.
Great.
All right.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Amy, we'll talk to you soon, but have a great rest of the week.
You too. Thank you.